look at. Obviously, how far is the toilet, the center line of the toilet from the wall? How much of a distance do you even have even walking into the bathroom or into the hotel rooms themselves? So there's a lot of things that we take a look at when we do this. You can see this is kind of an example of table of contents of one of the reports that we've done. This was specifically a parking lot. So again, we're measuring everything, and what you have is you have pictures with almost every single question you have. Here's some examples again of finding where the sign was too low. Here's an example of a 3 where they simply didn't have the slope requirements that are required. Here is a hotel that we had done. Again, you can see the lobby men's, the lobby women's. We had a golf shop men's, golf shop women's. This was a very big golf resort in the valley. So again, taking a look at some of the different things that you can do in terms of ensuring that your parking lot's compliant, your entrances are compliant, every aspect is compliant. As much as possible. And in some cases, there are some things you're not going to be able to do right away. You're really going to have to budget for those. But again, at least you know about them and you can start planning for them. All right, again, here's some other things. We've got the desks, we've got the doorknobs. The doorknob, again, would be a 4. It's a pretty easy fix. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. There are questions so far. This feels very weird to stand still. I rarely do that, but I know he's taping, and so if I start walking around, I'm going to get him real busy. But I want to make sure that everybody really has a good idea of what we're talking about here, especially as we get beyond the building and we get more to the practices. So service animals. How many of you have a no pet policy? Okay, how many of you very clearly state underneath your no pet policy that service dogs are permitted? Okay, it's really important because, by the way, it would be real easy for anybody to get online to take a look and see online it says no pets allowed, and then there's silence. It doesn't say no pets allowed except service animals. So if I see that online, I'm thinking these guys don't know what they're doing. To be quite honest, think about it. Okay, what do they say with great power comes great responsibility? I know the AAHOA really well, and if I was an evil person, I could start looking at all your websites and I could start doing this. Please, 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 let's not get to the point where these, I'm going to say, let me think, opportunistic. We don't want anybody just scoping out your website to try to find the red flags. I want you guys to go on your website. I want you guys to Google down onto your parking lots. I want you guys to see what are some areas that we need to make sure that we're protecting ourselves. By the way, not just to avoid a potential lawsuit, but because that's what we need to do anyways, okay? So if your hotel, if your website says no pets allowed, I really want to make sure underneath it you say except service animals, okay? Other things, we talked about this last time too, if you do not yet have a pool lift, please, please get a pool lift as soon as possible. One of the things that the particular company that's put out so many of these lawsuits has said is that they're now going around for round 2. And essentially round 2 says this: if they had an agreement with you that you were going to complete something and it was within a time frame, they will be back to check on it. And if you have not completed it, by the way, the level of that lawsuit takes on a whole nother level. So I would again implore you, if you had any kind of a settlement agreement, please, please, please take it serious. These guys have a lot of people working for them, and they're really wanting to make sure that they go back and make sure that things were done correctly. So let's get as much done as we possibly can, okay? Service animals, again, is a big one. People will call, for example, they did this originally, right? They called and said, do you have a pool? Why, yes, we do. Do you have a pool lift? No. Click. There's your lawsuit. Usually within about a week or 2, right? That's what you guys were experiencing. How hard would it be to say, do you allow pets? No. What about service animals? No. Click. Please don't say that, because service animals have to be allowed. But here's what I know is happening too. There's a lot of people coming in saying, oh, it's a service animal. And a lot of times people feel like they can't ask questions. And so we actually had a case last year where a hotel, a family came in, a young boy with a service dog, completely legit, okay? Came in with a service dog, and they said there was going to be a $10 pet fee. And they said, this is a service dog. And they actually had paperwork to prove it. Now, you don't have to have paperwork to prove this, by the way. But they had paperwork that this child needed the service dog, and this was a legitimately trained service dog. They still charged them $10. They got a lawsuit. Now, I want you to think about that, $10. And is that $10 really worth a lawsuit? It's not. And so, fortunately, the story ended up working out fairly well, because the people that were charge the $10. We're not litigious. But we all know that that's very rarely the case, right? And so again, I really want to encourage you guys to take a look at your policy. So we're going to talk a little bit about who, what, when, where, why, and how. So first off, what is a service dog? A service dog is any dog that is individually trained to work or perform tasks for the benefit of an individual with a disability, including a physical, sensory, psychiatric, intellectual, or mental disability. Now that is not, it's not a service cat, it's not a service rabbit, it's not a service iguana or monkey. It is a service dog, okay? Now, in some cases, it could be a small pony or like a miniature horse. In some cases, that is happening. I don't see it very often. In fact, I've only seen it one time completely, and that was at the Super Bowl a couple years ago. But otherwise, we're talking specifically about a dog. There are some questions that you can ask, and we're going to talk about those in just a moment. But these service dogs are allowed in any public place. So that's lodging establishments, food, theater, you name it. Specifically lodging, I know, is what our focus is going to be. But the question is, well, how do I know it's a service dog? And there are two questions that you can ask. Now, I'm going to ask you this first off. If the person comes in and you think they're probably blind because maybe they have the darker glasses on, they're holding the dog and it specifically says service dog for the blind or something to that effect, it's very clear that that dog is being guided by somebody, okay? Don't ask, because it's pretty obvious, right? If the person's in a wheelchair and the dog is with them, it's a good chance that that dog is picking things up for them. They're able to assist them in a variety of needs. So you don't have to ask that. What it does say is that when it's not obvious, these are two questions that you can ask, okay? The first one, is the animal required because of a disability? Now what you might get is somebody saying, well, you can't ask me about my disability. I wasn't asking about your disability. I'm just asking, is this an animal required because of a disability? It's just a yes or no, right? So hopefully the person is going to say yes, or they're going to say no if that's truly not the case and they're a bit surprised. Most of the time, of course, they're going to say yes, right? The next question, and by the way, this is on the tip sheet that you guys have in the center of your table. You have these two questions, okay? So the next question, and this is the more tricky one, is what work or task has the dog been trained to perform for you? What do you mean, what work or task? Now, I've asked this question to a lot of people, and what I have found sometimes is they get confused by it, and I'm not really sure why, but I've had to, in some cases, simplify it. I would encourage you guys as much as possible, ask it exactly the way it's written here. But if someone seems confused by it, you can simply say, so how does the dog help you? Oh, well then they tell me when my blood sugar is too low, or they pick things up for me. Okay, that makes sense, right? But for some reason, some people get a little bit confused by this question, but that's really what it comes down to, is what service or task. So if somebody says, well, I'm diabetic, your response should be, oh, I don't need to know what your disability is. By no means am I going to ask. I just need to know what specific service or task your dog has been trained to perform. Hey, listen, I told you I'm diabetic. I have an insulin pump right here, okay? I really appreciate your willingness to share with me. However, I just need to know, how does your dog help you? Well, he tells me when my blood sugar is too low. Cool, we're great then, right? Now, can you charge them a pet deposit? You cannot, okay? Can they leave their dog in the room and go out to dinner or wherever? No, they cannot. And we've heard of situations where this happens. This is my service dog. And they answer the questions correctly, and then they leave the dog there and they go somewhere else and the dog's left in the room barking. That is not allowed. So you know how you have their emergency contact information? You're going to call them and say, you need to come back and get your dog because your dog is barking in the room and it cannot disturb the other guests. But it's my service dog. Your service dog needs to be with you. The dog cannot be left in the apartment or in the room. What if the dog damages property? Can you charge? Absolutely you can, because you would charge anybody else, correct? But can you charge just a typical, like let's say that you do permit pets, but there's a $25 pet deposit. Okay, $25 pet deposit for a pet. You cannot charge a $25 pet deposit for a service animal. But if either of these animals damages property, you can absolutely charge for that. Does that make sense? So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to kind of go through with some of this. I know it can be a little bit confusing. Are there questions about this, by the way? Yes, please. Very good question. Thank you so much. Okay, so the animal does not have, the dog does not have to have a harness. It does not have to have a leash. It does not have to have a specific vest. It does not have to have paperwork, okay? It doesn't have to have any of that. By the way, you can buy any of those things online. Anybody could do that, and many people do. So they do not have to have that. In terms of, it does say that the dog has to be harnessed, leashed, tethered, or under the verbal control of the owner. So we have a situation, my full-time job is with Chase Field and with the Talking Stick Resort Arena. I'm their ADA coordinator. This is what I do all the time. So you can imagine how many people come in and out with their service dogs, right? And we have this one particular gentleman who comes to D-backs games fairly often. I think he's a disabled vet. And he comes in, and the staff were getting a little bit nervous because when he would go to the concession stand, he would have his dog on, it's kind of like a leash, but it's more like just a rope that he holds. He doesn't even wrap it around his arm. So he goes over to the concession stands and he gets his food, and then he lets that go and he carries the concessions back over to his seat, and his dog walks right along next to him. So the staff were getting a little bit nervous, like, no, I thought they had to be on a leash, they had to be holding the leash. Well, ideally, yes, but the truth is it also says they have to be at least under the control, the verbal control of their owner. Or in some cases, being on that leash means that the dog can't do the tasks it's performed to do or it's trained to do. So that's okay as long as the dog is right there. But if that dog starts running around, now we have a problem, right? If the dog is in your hotel and is a service dog, but they're not holding it onto a leash or anything, and that dog starts to bark at somebody else or it starts to run around, that's not okay. It still has to be under the control of the owner. So if it gets out of control, you can say you need to maintain control of the dog. Now, let's say the dog starts barking. You just hear the dog barking. You're like, why? They're not keeping the dog under control, right? Well, in some cases, it could be that the dog barks to alert you that the person has fallen down and that they're hurt, or they're having a seizure and they need assistance, or that something has happened. So in some cases, a dog might be trained to bark for those very reasons. But otherwise, the dog should not be barking, should not be disrupting anyone else, okay? By the way, you also cannot ask the person to have the dog demonstrate that it performs the task. Why do you suppose that is? Let's say the dog is trained to let you know when the person's having a seizure. Do you really want the person to just have a seizure right there so you can see if the dog really knows how to do it? Or do you really want to like give the person a whole bunch of sugar and see if the dog notifies you that their blood sugar spiked up too high? Probably not. So you cannot ask them to have the dog demonstrate the task. Okay? So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, the business shall not ask about the nature or the extent of a person's disability. The business shall not ask for documentation. The business shall not ask for a demonstration. Okay? So hopefully all of those have been helpful. When not to ask, again, we talked about this just a little bit. If the dog is observed guiding a person who's blind or has low vision, if the dog is observed pulling a person's wheelchair or providing assistance for stability. In some cases, we've seen like really big dogs like Great Danes that are walking alongside the person, and the dog is there to help stabilize them, okay? Some people get a little bit nervous about, well, what if it's a pit bull? We had a situation like this once. We had a pit bull that came to a Phoenix Suns game, and not everybody, some people got a little bit freaked out about it. It doesn't matter what kind of dog it is. And by the way, pit bulls happen to be wonderful. I love my pit very much. They're wonderful dogs, and we can't discriminate against any one of them. But if it's a Chihuahua, though, how is a Chihuahua really going to be able to help somebody? Well, could they still notify them of their medication? Could they still alert them if their blood sugar is too high or too low with epilepsy? So again, regardless of the size or the type of dog, they could still be trained, okay? Again, we're talking about the handler's obligations. We talked about this again a little bit. The service animal must be under the control of the owner. Again, in some cases, it might just be a voice control, but they still need to be under the control. What you guys need to do is make sure that your staff, I don't mean just your managers, I mean your staff. Middle of the night, someone calls and asks these questions, you need to be prepared. So make sure that all of your staff know the laws and the policies. You have this tip sheet, and the back of the tip sheet has information specifically for you guys to, for example, have at your front counter. So that a person calls and they ask some questions, you have some basic information there, okay? Make sure they're prepared to answer questions when called or when the guests arrive. And then do not ask, by the way, ever to pet the dog or distract it from its owner. As much as you might want to pet the dog, please do not ask, because it puts the person in kind of a tough spot. Now, some common questions here, and by the way, this is all on the Department of Justice website, okay? So can hotels assign designated rooms for guests with service animals? They cannot, okay? There's other things. Can they charge a cleaning fee? We've already said they cannot specifically charge a cleaning fee. Are they allowed to leave the service animal in the room? No, the dog must be under the handler's control at all times. It is right here in writing for you guys, okay? So I want to make sure, again, you know this is a resource for you. Again, why? Because this is the law, and we have to ask ourselves, is a lawsuit worth $10? The situation with the $10, it could have been really, really, really bad. And again, they lucked out quite a ways. I actually was on the phone when we had a mediation communication with Washington, D.C. on this through the Department of Justice. Unfortunately, it did go well, but I will tell you, it could have been really, really bad. There's tax incentives for ADA modifications. There's tax credits and tax deductions. And I'm going to go through this just a little bit. I want to ask first real quick, because we're going to wind down in a moment. Are there any questions about what we've been talking about so far? As you think of questions, please, yes, please.
So with the pool lift, is it okay to not have this battery in there, but have a sign saying that the battery is in office?
No, they will ask you that and they will sue you for that, okay? So if you have a pool that is open from 8 in the morning to 8 at night, okay? That pool lift needs to be available there. If it's a portable one, it needs to be in place. It has to have its battery right there, and you have to have the covering off of it, okay, completely. So if I come in and I'm in a wheelchair, I should not have to try to pull that cover off. I should not have to see the battery's not there, wheel myself up to the front desk, wait for someone to go, oh my gosh, where in the world is that thing? I don't think that thing is charged, whatever. It needs to be charging every night when the pool is closed. You need to put it back in every single day. So when the pool is open, it needs to be completely readily available to any guest. And that, by the way, is a pool and a spa both. Absolutely a pool and a spa. Good question, thank you. And we see that a lot, by the way. A lot, where there's a cover over it or the battery's not in. They do make them now, by the way, that are solar powered, which makes perfect sense in Arizona, right?
Well, it's mainly because of the heat deteriorating battery.
Right. No, and that makes perfect sense, and I completely get that. That's why I think the solar powered ones can be very helpful, and I would suggest having 2 battery packs. And again, I understand the sun is going to beat the snot out of these things, but so is the lawyers, to be quite honest. And really, the spirit of the law says, I want to go and enjoy the pool with my friends and family, and I want to be able to just get into the pool. I don't want to have to go ask the front desk for the battery itself. So it's a good idea to have that there, and it's the law. Other questions before we talk a little bit about tax credits? All right. I don't like standing still. Are we getting all this? Okay, so you can go back and watch. I've never been so unanimated talking to a group. But I want to make sure that you guys can go back and watch this, or other people who weren't able to be here can also. So the tax credits and tax deductions are something you can use every single year, okay? Tax credit itself is for small businesses who remove access barriers from their facilities, provide accessible services, or take other steps to improve accessibility for customers with disabilities, just like it says, okay? A tax deduction itself is for businesses of all sizes to remove access barriers to their facilities or their vehicles, okay? A business that annually incurs eligible expenses to bring itself into compliance with the ADA may use these deductions or these tax incentives every single year. So now I want you to imagine you have it in your budget every single year because you've already done a transition plan report. You know, this is where I'm at, this is where I need to be, and this is how I'm going to get there. And every single year you're planning this out, right? And so if you have this budgeted every year, you work this out. And by the way, don't even ask me questions about taxes and money other than what I'm reading here, because I couldn't tell you. You need to talk to your own accountants to figure out, okay, what can we do and how can we optimize this? And here's an example that they give you. So Hotel ABC spent $20,000 on access improvements by modifying their guest rooms and their front entrance, okay? These expenditures qualify under both the tax credit and deduction. So ABC Hotel can take these incentives in combination. They may first take a tax credit of $5,000, okay? That's based on $10,250. That's kind of like that's the expenditures, and you can take half of that, okay? And then they can deduct $15,000, which is of course the difference between the total expenditures and the amount of the credit claimed. So you can do that every single year. So by the way, what happens when you work to improve access to your hotels? Do you put on that old wallpaper? Do you put back in that old carpet? You probably don't, right? You probably put in new things, and you're doing all these things as a remodel. So are you every single year making your hotel better? Making it more attractive, making it more modern, whatever it is, you're making improvements to it every year, and you've got tax deductions and tax credits. Above and beyond what you would normally have as a business, you have this specifically related to improving access. And what this does, by the way, is it makes it better for everybody. It truly does. And so I really want to encourage you guys to take advantage of this and really plan out, how am I going to do this so I can maximize it every single year so I can get the most out of this, every single year. This is a cartoon that I absolutely love, and I'm going to read it to you guys because I'm not sure how well you can see it, because I like to kind of explain it. What you have here, to sort of visualize it for people who might not be able to see it, is you have a picture of, it looks like somewhere back east, snow, and you've got a kid, and it looks like a schoolyard. You've got a kid in a wheelchair, he's at the bottom of a ramp. You have a couple other kids, and they're at the bottom of the stairs, and they're waiting for what's maybe the janitor or someone, and he is cleaning off the steps. Okay, he's taking the snow off of the steps with a shovel. The kid who's waiting at the bottom of the ramp in his wheelchair says, "Could you please shovel the ramp?" And the gentleman who's moving the snow says, "All these kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you." And then the kid says, "But if you shovel the ramp, then we can all get in." Now think about that for a second. When you have access, when you have an accessible entrance, think about how nice it is to have those automatic door openers when your hands are really full and you can just bump them with your hip and the door opens for you, right? Think about when you have that access, it makes it better for everybody. It truly does. And so this is a perfect example that when you make it accessible, it makes it better for everyone. And so that's really what we're encouraging people to do, is to just start thinking in terms of universal design. How can I make things the most accessible for everybody? And how can I myself start taking a look at my parking lot, my lobby, my rooms, my hotel in general? How can I take a look at all my properties from sort of a different perspective of how would I be able to get into this if, for example, all of a sudden I found myself in a wheelchair, or I found myself without my ability to use and open my hands? So you start thinking in terms of those things, and it really starts to make a big difference for you. So other questions? Anything at all? Because we have how much time now? 10 minutes. No, I like 10 better. 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes. Any questions at all? You know you're going to come up with some questions later. I will tell you the biggest culprits are the bathrooms. Again, if there's about 80 questions in bathrooms, you can imagine how many things we might find wrong. We find in many cases that just basic things, mirrors are too high, dispensers are too high. We find in some cases, of course, the toilet. A lot of times, for some reason, everybody buys toilets with the handle on one side. But you can buy them so the handle's on either side, right? And so what we find is we find a hotel that all of the toilets have the handle on one side. Well, that works really well in some situations. But in other situations, when it's an ADA room and the toilet is on the other side, that handle is supposed to be on the open side. So it's a matter of just having a different toilet. That's a really pretty basic one also, is you're making those choices. As you're purchasing products, I want you to think about that. So if you're purchasing a paper towel dispenser, for example, for a public bathroom, do you want the paper towel dispenser that you have to like twist to get it open? You know how it's supposed to automatically come out, but it doesn't? It gets shoved back up in there for some reason, and you actually have to take your fingers and you have to twist it to get it out. That makes it rather difficult. What I'd encourage you to do is get the kind that's like a paddle, that you can literally paddle the paper towels down, or you have the kind that you can lever them down. Either one of those, closed fist, okay? Let's see. Question? Please.
So a question for you I had was, I know a lot of people use stuff like that, EBT news up in Phoenix, and a little documentary on some of the boards that have
Yes.
getting all the hotels for a lawsuit and things like that. Now, are they still allowed to sue other hotels because they're under investigation? Are they stopping them, or what's the details on that?
They are still allowed to sue, and more important than that is anybody's allowed to sue you still. So you could literally have a lawsuit pending from this company, and I've seen this before, by the way. This organization is suing you, and at the same time, this organization comes in. And now you've got a double lawsuit. We've seen that on many occasions. If you're in the midst of, in fact, having a survey done, you could still be sued. So really, we want to encourage you as much as possible. Take a look at all of the outside things first and foremost. Take a look at those. Take a look at your website. If you don't have a pool lift, by the way, and you have a picture of your pool on your website, you're asking for trouble. You are asking for trouble. Please take the picture off there and then get that pool lift installed as soon as possible. And then you can put that beautiful picture back on with the pool lift installed. What I'll tell you in terms of the pool lifts too, by the way, is be really careful. I'm going to say be really careful in general, because I've seen too many times where somebody's really, with well intentions, my brother's friend's cousin can do this. And they're going to come install this pool lift. But they don't embed it down enough. And by the way, imagine the liability when someone who's pretty big gets into that pool lift and it hurts them. It gets tipped over. We had a situation where we had done an assessment we give pretty detailed plans of this is what you need to do. In many cases we do drawings, and I'm not an architect, but I do these lame little drawings, and I'll show you exactly what you need to do. So we had a situation where we actually went back up to a property. If at all possible, when we're back up in an area where we've done surveys before, we want to let the property owners know that we're there, so that if they want us to come by and take a look at anything, we're more than welcome to do that, and there's of course no charge. So I was really excited when I went back to a particular hotel, and they were so excited to show me all the neat things that they had done. And it was fantastic. The lobby was fantastic. There was all these great things, and they took us into the bathroom of the newly renovated ADA room, and the sink was too high. And my heart sank. And the grab bars were too high, and my heart sank. And I thought, oh my goodness, they just put all of this money into renovating this hotel room and this bathroom, and the contractor who installed it didn't install it right. That's really sad. So please, please, please watch really closely. Don't assume that the person knows what they're doing. Take a look at the plans that we've given you. Take a look at, more importantly, take a look at the images, the illustrations that they gave you directly from the Department of Justice. And when that person's doing that, make sure you're keeping an eye. Don't just assume. I've seen many, many cases where they just installed something and the grab bars aren't correct. And that's a pain to have to take those grab bars out and to have to reinstall them with all the backing. So please take ownership of this yourself. Really take a good look at what's happening and make sure that they're following the law to the letter. In many cases, the ADA now is giving you like a leeway. So for example, a grab bar, 33 to 36 inches to the top of the grab bar.